My parents told me they didn't want kids at Christmas, so my son wasn't invited. But when I arrived, I found my sister's children enjoying the party. They deserved to be here, their family, my mother said. So I smiled and told them that my money was no longer part of their family. I always believed my family was a safe place, a refuge where we were all equal. My parents, my sister Laura, and I had shared so much. Christmas filled with laughter, summer afternoons in the backyard, even tough times, like when my father had to close his small business years ago. I was always there for them, not just with words, but with actions. Every month. Since Clara and I started earning a bit more from our jobs, I sent money to my parents to help with their bills. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for them to live without too many worries. My son, Mateo, 5 years old, was my pride and joy, and I always thought my parents saw him as part of the family I cherished so much. But all that crumbled with a phone call I'll never forget. It was a Friday in early December. I was at home, sitting in the living room with a cup of coffee, while Clara helped Mateo with a puzzle on the floor. The phone rang, and I saw it was my mother. I answered with a mix of curiosity and excitement, thinking she might want to talk about Christmas plans. It was always the same. They provided the house. Laura brought something sweet, and I took care of the turkey and some extras. It was a tradition I enjoyed, even if it cost time and money. "Hi, Mom," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "Hi, son," she replied. Her voice sounded tense, like she was about to say something she didn't want to. "Look, I want to talk about Christmas this year." "Sure, what's up? Need me to bring anything else?" I asked, unsuspecting. There was a brief silence, and she said, "No, it's not that. This year, your father and I want to do something different. We don't want kids at the Christmas dinner." I froze. I looked at Mateo, who was giggling as he placed a puzzle piece in the wrong spot. "What do you mean, no kids?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just that," she said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "We want a quiet night, just adults. Kids make noise, run around, and your father and I need a break. So Mateo shouldn't come." It felt like a punch to the chest. It wasn't just that they didn't want my son at their house. It was how she said it. Like Mateo was a nuisance, something they could easily cut out of the equation. I tried to respond calmly. "But, Mom, it's Christmas. Mateo's always been there. He's your grandson. What are we supposed to do, leave him home alone?" "Don't be dramatic," she replied with that sharp tone she used to end arguments. "You can find someone to watch him or stay with him. It's just one night. No big deal." "No big deal," I repeated, almost myself. I couldn't believe it. My son, the child they claimed to love, wasn't welcome at the celebration that had always been for everyone. I wanted to argue more, but something stopped me. Maybe the shock, or maybe I didn't want to fight over phone. "Fine, Mom," I said, my voice cold. "I'll talk to Clara and let you know." "Perfect," she replied, as if we'd settled something trivial. "See you soon." I hung up and set the phone on the table. Clara looked up from the floor, frowning. "What's wrong?" she asked as Mateo kept playing, oblivious to everything. I told her everything, word for word. She stood up, crossing her arms. "Are you serious? They don't want Mateo? What's wrong with them?" "I don't know," I said, running a hand over my face. "But I'm not letting them treat him like he doesn't matter." Clara put a hand on my shoulder. "Then we don't go. If they don't want our son, they don't want us. We can have our own Christmas here with him. We don't need their approval to be happy." She was right, but something in me couldn't let it go. I didn't want to call my mother again, not after that conversation, and I didn't want to talk to Laura either. My sister was always the type to avoid conflict, and something told me she'd side with my parents just to stay out of trouble. If my parents and Laura wanted to play at deciding who was family and who wasn't, I had something to say too. It was December 24th. Clara and I spent the morning decorating the house and playing with Mateo. He was thrilled, running around the living room with a Christmas ornament in his hand. That afternoon, while Clara prepared a simple dinner for the three of us, I put on a jacket and grabbed my car keys. "I'm going to stop by my parents' house." I told her, just for a bit, I need to make things clear. She looked at me, worried but resolute. "Do what you have to, but don't let them make you feel bad." We're fine here. I know, I said, giving her a hug. I'll be back soon. I drove to my parents' house with a blank mind. I didn't know exactly what I'd say, but I was certain of one thing. I wasn't going to let them treat my son like he was worthless. I rang the doorbell, and my mother opened the door with a smile that faded slightly when she saw me alone. "Son, what are you doing here?" she said, looking behind me as if expecting to see Clara and Mateo. "I thought you weren't coming." "I'm not staying," I replied, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I just wanted to see something." I walked into the living room, and then I saw them, Sophia and Lucas, Laura's kids, running around the Christmas tree with toys in their hands. Laura was sitting on the couch, laughing, while my father handed them a plate of cookies. The scene hit me like a hammer. My parents had said no kids, but there were my sister's kids, enjoying the party like nothing was wrong. I stopped dead, looking at my mother, who was now beside me with an uncomfortable expression. Laura looked up and saw me but said nothing. The air felt heavy, and I knew this was the moment I'd been waiting for. I stood in the middle of the living room, the sound of Sophia and Lucas's laughter echoing in my ears. The Christmas tree sparkled with colored lights, and the smell of freshly baked turkey filled the air. Everything seemed perfect like the Christmases of old, but to me, it was a scene I couldn't stomach. My parents had said no kids, yet there were Laura's kids, running and play like nothing had changed. I felt the blood rush to my head, and the anger I'd been holding back for weeks exploded. "What is this?" I said, turning to my mother. My voice came out louder than I expected, and everyone in the room went silent. Sophia and Lucas stopped running and looked at me with wide eyes, while Laura straightened up on the couch, frowning. "What's wrong, son?" my mother asked, her tone trying to sound calm but betraying her nervousness. "What's wrong?" I repeated, almost laughing at how absurd it was. "You told me you didn't want kids at Christmas, that Mateo couldn't come because you want a quiet night. But I look around, and I see Laura's kids here, playing and eating like it's nothing. Can you explain what's going on?" My father, who was near the table setting plates, put down what he was doing and walked over. His face was serious, but he didn't say anything yet. Laura stood up, crossing her arms. "Don't make a drama out of this," she said in that tone she used when she wanted to seem reasonable. "Mom and Dad just wanted something different this year. My kids aren't a problem. They know the house and how to behave." "Know how to behave?" I replied, staring at her. "Mateo's 5, Laura. He's a kid, just like Sophia and Lucas. What's so different about him?" My mother raised her hands, as if trying to calm things down. "Listen, it's not personal. We just thought it'd be easier this way. Sophia and Lucas are used to being here, and Mateo, well, he's younger, more restless. We want a night without so much chaos." "Without so much chaos," I said, feeling each word like a punch. "Mateo is your grandson. He's part of this family, or at least I thought he was, but it seems like he's not the same to you." My father finally spoke, his voice deep and firm. "Don't get like that. It's our house, and we decide how we want to spend Christmas. If you don't like it, no one's forcing you to be here." That was like pouring gasoline on a fire. I looked at my father, then my mother, and finally at Laura, who stood there with a mix of discomfort and defiance. In that moment, I knew there was no going back. They'd made their choice, and so had I. "Fine," I said, taking a deep breath to stay calm. "If Mateo isn't welcome here, then neither am I. And if you think you can pick and choose who's family and who isn't, let me tell you something. My money isn't part of this family either." The silence that followed was so heavy I could almost touch it. My mother's mouth dropped open in shock. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm saying it's over," I replied, looking her in the eyes. "For years, I've sent you money every month, for bills, for food, for whatever you needed. I did it because I thought we were a family, that we supported each other. But if my son doesn't deserve to be here, then neither does my help. As of today, don't expect another cent from me." Laura stepped forward, her face red. "You can't do that. You know they depend on that money. You're going to punish them over one dinner?" "It's not about one dinner," I said, turning to her. It's about what it means. You decided my son doesn't matter, that he's not as much family as your kids. So don't talk to me about punishment. This is what you chose. My father pressed his lips together, and for a second, I thought he'd yell at me, but he didn't. Instead, he said, if that's what you want, go. We don't need your money or your drama. I nodded, feeling a mix of pain and relief. I looked around one last time. The tree, the gifts, the plates ready for dinner, everything that had once meant home to me. Now it felt like a strange place. Without another word, I turned and walked to the door. My mother called after me, "Wait, we can talk about this. Don't leave like this." But I didn't stop. I walked out, closed the door behind me, and got in my car. As I drove home, the anger started to mix with something else, a sense of freedom. I'd said what I needed to say, and though it hurt, it also felt right. When I got home, Clara was in the living room with Mateo, who was running around with an oversized Santa hat. "How'd it go?" she asked, getting up from the couch. I told him it's over. I said, taking off my jacket. If Mateo isn't family to them, my money isn't either. Clara smiled a little, though her eyes showed concern. "And what did they do?" "Nothing," I said. I left before they could say much. "But it's done." That night, the three of us had dinner together. It wasn't the grand feast we used to have at my parents' house, but there was laughter, warmth, and love. Mateo fell asleep on the couch after opening a small gift, and Clara and I stayed up talking late. I knew what had happened at that house would have consequences, but I didn't realize how quickly they'd come. The next morning, December 25th, I woke up to Clara shaking my shoulder. "Your phone won't stop ringing," she said, handing it to me. I looked at the screen. 16 missed calls, 10 from my mother, 4 from Laura, 2 from my father. No messages, just the calls. I set the phone on the table and got up to make coffee. "Aren't you going to answer?" Clara asked. "No," I said calmly. They made their choice. Now I'm making mine. The following days were quiet. They didn't call again, and I made no effort to reach out. Clara and I focused on our routine, Mateo, work, our home. But I couldn't help wondering what was happening with them. I knew the money I sent was a big part of their day-to-day life. Without it, things would get tough. Part of me felt guilty, but then I'd remember Sophia and Lucas running around the living room while my son was excluded, and the guilt faded. Weeks passed, and I started hearing rumors. A mutual friend said my parents were struggling to pay their bills. Laura tried to help, but with 2 kids and a regular job, she couldn't do much. Then, in late January, my mother called again. This time, I let it ring until it went to voicemail. I listened to the message later. "Son, it's me. Look, I know you're upset and I'm sorry. We shouldn't have done things that way. We're in a tough spot now and we need you. Please call me. We can fix this." I listened to those words and felt a knot in my stomach. It wasn't an apology for Mateo. It was a plea for money. If they weren't in trouble, they'd never have called. I deleted the message and didn't respond. Clara saw me and said nothing, just gave me a hug. She knew I was doing the right thing, even if it wasn't easy. Months passed, and things got worse in my family. I heard from acquaintances that my father had to sell his old car, and that Laura was looking for a second job. Then, in the summer, I learned they'd lost a house. They couldn't pay the mortgage without my help, and moved to a small place in a rough part of town. Part of me felt pity, but another part knew they dug their own hole. Meanwhile, my life with Clara and Mateo moved forward. We moved to a bigger house with the money I no longer sent to my parents. Mateo started school, and we began building something new, something ours. I didn't need my family's approval to feel complete. Update 1. Weeks had passed since that Christmas Eve at my parents' house. After confronting them and telling them my money was no longer part of their family, I went home to Clara and Mateo. That night, we had a simple dinner, but it was filled with warmth. Mateo fell asleep on the couch with a gift in his hands, and Clara and I talked late into the night. I knew my decision would have consequences, but I didn't realize how quickly they'd come or how they'd make me feel. On December 25th, I woke up to a phone full of notifications. 16 missed calls. 10 from my mother, from Laura, 2 from my father. They left no messages, just kept calling. Clara handed me the phone while making breakfast, and I stared at it for a moment before setting it on the table. "Aren't you going to answer?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "No," I said calmly. "They made their choice. Now I'm making mine." They didn't call again after that, and I didn't try to reach them. We focused on our life, Mateo, work, our home. But deep down, I knew the money I sent each month was a big part of their stability. Without it, things would get complicated for them. Part of me felt guilty, but then I'd remember Sophia and Lucas running around the living room while my son was excluded, and that guilt vanished. Weeks passed, and I started hearing rumors. A mutual friend said my parents were behind on bills. Laura tried to help, but with 2 kids and a regular job, she couldn't do much. It didn't surprise me, but it didn't move me to act either. They decided Mateo wasn't part of their family. I was just following the rules they'd set. Then, one Saturday in February, the doorbell rang. It was a cold afternoon, and Clara was in the living room with Mateo, helping him draw. I went to the door, thinking it might be a neighbor, but when I opened it, there they were, my mother, Laura, and Laura's 2 kids, Sophia and Lucas. My mother's eyes were red, like she'd been crying, and Laura held the kids' hands with a look of defeat. "Son, please hear us out," my mother said, her voice trembling. "We're so sorry. We shouldn't have done that at Christmas. It was a mistake, and now we're in trouble. We need you." Laura stepped forward, with Sophia and Lucas clinging to her. The kids looked at me with their small, innocent faces, and something in my chest tightened. She spoke, almost whispering, "My husband left 2 years ago. I'm a single mom, and I can't handle everything. Mom and Dad are about to lose the house. Please help us. We don't know what else to do." Seeing Sophia and Lucas there, so vulnerable, made me waver. They weren't guilty of the adults' decisions. Laura was alone, struggling for her kids, and my parents, though they'd acted wrongly, were elderly and in a tough spot. I felt a mix of pity and anger. I remember the pain of Mateo being sidelined, but I also saw these kids who weren't to blame. I went inside without a word, grabbed my checkbook, and wrote a check for $5,000. I went back to the porch and handed it to my mother. "This is the last thing you'll ever get from me," I said, my voice cold. "Use it to get by for a while, but listen carefully. If you show up at my house again, if you bother my family, I'll call the police. I don't want to see you here ever again." My mother took the check with trembling hands, staring at it like she couldn't believe it. Laura looked up, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means." "I'm not doing it for you," I said, looking at the kids. "I'm doing it for them. But this ends here." I closed the door before they could say more. I leaned against it, taking a deep breath, as Clara came out of the living room. "What happened?" she asked, with Mateo peeking out behind her. "They came to ask for help," I said, running a hand over my face. "I gave them $5,000 and told them not to come back." Clara looked surprised, but not angry. "Are you okay with that?" "Yeah," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure. "I wanted to close this for good. For us." She nodded and gave me a hug. After that day, I didn't see them again. I heard from acquaintances that they used the money to pay some debts, but it wasn't enough. They lost the house a few months later and moved to a small place in a low-income area. My father, at 62, had to get a job at a store to support them. Laura kept struggling as a single mom. And though it hurt a little to hear, it wasn't my responsibility to carry them after what they'd done. Months passed, and my life with Clara and Mateo grew stronger. With the money I no longer sent to my parents, we saved and moved to a bigger house. Mateo started school, and we built something ours, something that didn't depend on anyone else. I didn't need my family to feel complete. I had everything that mattered right in front of me. December came again, a year after that Christmas that changed everything. On the 24th, Clara and I decorated the house with lights and a big tree. Mateo ran around the living room, excited about the gifts already under it. We made a simple dinner: turkey, mashed potatoes, and a cake we baked together. There was no noise of arguments or tension, just laughter and warmth. After dinner, we sat on the couch with Mateo opening a gift while Clara and I watched, smiling. "This is all I need," I said, taking Clara's hand. She squeezed mine and nodded, far from them, but happy. Mateo ran over with a new toy in his hands and climbed onto my lap. I hugged him tightly, feeling that for the first time in a long time, everything was in its place. Outside, the world kept turning, but inside those four walls, we had our own Christmas, our own family, and that was enough.